Welcome to Athens Happens. I'm Ben Peters, a news editor at The New Political. Athens Happens is a weekly news podcast brought to you by TMP reporters dedicated to explaining the nuances of Athens and state politics. You can find new episodes every Friday at thenewpolitical.com, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, or wherever else podcasts can be downloaded. Following several attempts to get the show on iTunes and several listeners reaching out to us asking if we can get the show on iTunes, I am very excited to announce that Athens Happens is finally available on iTunes and all third-party platforms that use iTunes to get their podcasts. So please go on to iTunes. I will put a link in the description of this episode and leave us a review and a 5-star rating as it helps boost us on the platform. Thank you so much. On to the show. Today, we're going to discuss Ohio University's decision to immediately suspend all activities of 15 fraternities within the Interfraternity Council due to a recent rush of hazing allegations. An incident involving a young black man who was arrested by Athens City Police Department officers in a way that some have characterized as excessive. And a forum held last week featuring candidates running for Athens City Council where they discussed issues such as housing reform and city policing. First, we're going to look at Ohio University's decision to suspend the activities of all 15 fraternities within the Interfraternity Council, the governing body of the organizations, following a recent rush of hazing allegations. Immediately before recording this podcast on Wednesday evening, news broke that 3 sororities and 1 professional fraternity are also being investigated for hazing. I'm here with staff writer Eric Boll, who's covered the entire saga for TNP. How are you, Eric?
It's been an interesting past couple hours with all this news coming out about the new investigations.
Yeah? So I want you to take us back, all the way back to the beginning, about a year ago, a little over a year ago, whenever, this saga of fraternity hazing allegations began. Yeah.
So I'm going to do one even better and take us 3 more years back after that.
Excellent.
So in 2015, Acacia, which is one of the fraternities currently under investigation, was also under investigation at that time for allegedly breaking the university's code of conduct in that they sang a version of a Beatles song, Hey Jude, I believe, on their front porch that was very sexually explicit.
Gotcha.
So the university issued a cease and desist at that time and investigated them, and at that time they found no evidence of hazing taking place. So flashing back up to 2018, we had the unfortunate death of Colin Wyant,
an OU student.
On campus. He was a pledge for Sigma Pi, which in 2019 was expelled from campus.
Yeah.
And, barred from returning. Also in 2018, we did see a tactic similar to what's happening now with all our fraternities being suspended happen at OSU.
Ohio State University.
Yes. They suspended all of their Greek life during that time period as well for almost an entire year.
Yeah.
So it seems like it may be a new tactic schools are taking to try and curtail kind of the negative effects Greek life can have, such as hazing and underage drinking and other tactics, as kind of a collective punishment may take some of the fraternities to put more pressure on the others to follow the rules.
So take us back about a week ago when all of these fraternities were suspended, effective immediately. What happened?
So it all began with the university issuing a cease and desist to Acacia and I believe Alpha Epsilon Pi, and they made a statement and the news cycle began to write about it. And then within a 48-hour time period, the university had received reports of hazing coming in from 5 more fraternities on campus. So that brought the total up to 7 fraternities currently being investigated for hazing or of allegations of hazing. So the university felt it was justified to completely suspend all members of the IFC, the Interfraternity Council, and begin proceedings for an investigation.
So there were fraternities in the IFC that were suspended that had no allegations brought against them.
Yes. At the time of the suspension, 8 of the 15 fraternities had no allegations. So the majority of the IFC had a clean record at the time for hazing this year.
Okay.
So that kind of riled some feathers, and it was reported by the A News that Judson Horace, I believe is how his name is said, who is the president and CEO of the North American Interfraternity Conference, criticized the punishment of the 8 innocent fraternities, and he believed that it was unjustified and that it was punishing innocent fraternities who were following the rules the university put on them.
Mm-hmm.
Following that statement, right now 2 more of the fraternities in the Interfraternity Council have allegations made against them. So they have kind of put a little egg on his face, to use the turn of phrase.
Mm.
So let's get into kind of what being suspended means for these organizations.
Okay.
So the 15 IFC fraternities are not allowed to have any new member events. So they have to kind of halt their entire pledge process.
Mm-hmm.
They are not allowed to have council or chapter meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So they cannot have... So they cannot all meet.
Yeah, in an official
sense.
capacity.
The brothers who still live in the fraternity house are
Mm-hmm.
still allowed to live there
Mm-hmm.
because that's where they live. The
Right.
university is not going to kick them out of their housing.
Correct.
They are allowed to have no socials.
Mm.
So they are not allowed to throw parties. They are not allowed to hold any social events. They are not allowed to have any philanthropic events.
Mm-hmm.
So they aren't allowed to hold any charity drives, any kind of philanthropy is a no-no.
Yeah.
They are not allowed to hold any retreats or intramurals. And here's the big one, they are allowed to have no organized involvement in homecoming.
Which is this weekend. This
Yes.
episode will go up on Friday. Homecoming will be tomorrow.
Yes. And as we know, a lot of alumni like to come into town for homecoming weekend.
Mm-hmm.
The university even holds its awards for alumni
Yeah.
during this time period. So we will have many members who are former members of these fraternities on campus this weekend, and they will not be able to see the fraternities they were part of being active.
Mm.
So what's next after this suspension?
Mm-hmm.
So those who do have the cease and desists and are being currently investigated have to go through the investigative process. They have to produce a list of all their pledges. Many of them will presumably be having to make statements to the investigators and to the university. And those who do not have current charges presumably will have a easier time getting reinstated.
Mm.
And this has kind of changed as we have seen 2 of the fraternities who were previously in the clear now be facing allegations.
Yeah.
So I am personally wondering if we will see this fast track process kind of slow down a little bit.
Mm.
But as we mentioned, right before this, we heard news that 3 sororities and 1 professional fraternity had now had allegations made of hazing made against them.
Yeah.
And the professional fraternity is the business fraternity. It is, I'm not entirely good at Greek.
Yeah.
I believe it's Pi Chi Theta is how you pronounce it. And they are the business educational fraternity on campus. So they have their allegations. And then the 3 sororities are Delta, Zeta, Omicron, Gamma chapter, Omega Tau Alpha chapter, and Pi Beta Phi's Ohio Alpha chapter.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be very interesting how this is all going to turn out.
Mm.
I think that Ohio University has a very prevalent and prominent Greek life culture, and to see that come to a screeching halt on arguably one of their most important weekends of the year
Yeah.
will probably have some pretty large effects on both the alums and on the student body as a whole.
Yeah.
I know just from in general hearing from pledges just on the street and people who are in my dorm who are in the pledge process, they think that it is extremely unfair and unjust that the innocent fraternities,
Right. The ones who have not been investigated.
yeah, who don't have any charges against them, got caught up in this ban. They don't believe that collective punishment is justified.
Mm-hmm.
And they think that it is going to cause kind of the innocent fraternities to have a little bit of resentment for how the university treated them in this process.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this? Any other important details that we might have glossed over?
So it is important to note that this is still kind of news that is developing.
Yeah.
When this story first broke about the IFC being suspended, people were saying on Twitter that the police were raiding the fraternities.
Right. Which was not true.
As someone who was on College Row at the time, I can tell you that I did not see any police, wearing riot gear, kind of busting down the fraternity doors, being like, yeah, let's go find some drugs.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to encourage people to be very hesitant about what people say about this story.
Yeah.
Because some people on campus do have their own opinions about Greek life, and some are very much so in favor, some are very much so in against. So I would just caution people to not get caught up in the opinions of others or in the moment and kind of make a hasty decision to either write off or endorse Greek life. I'd say wait for the investigation to finish, wait for the university to issue its judgment, then kind of decide if you feel the university was justified to make this decision.
We also mentioned the kid who was interviewed on CBS, I think. The meme kid.
The one bad pumpkin seed does not ruin an entire pumpkin patch.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. We really appreciate you being here.
I enjoyed being on the podcast.
See you, man.
Yep, you too.
Hello, everyone. I'm Maggie Prosser, editor-in-chief here at The New Political. Each and every day, I work alongside reporters, editors, producers, and managers who put their heart and soul into the journalism we produce. Here at TNP, we have the honor to tell the stories of the residents of this small town we call home. We're looking for local businesses and other ventures to help us continue funding for our independent journalism, including the podcast you're listening to right now. TNP would love to advertise for you through our website, our biannual magazine, or right here on Athens Happens. If interested, please send an inquiry email to execedit@thenewpolitical.com for more details. We hope working together can support both your initiative and fuel TNP's strong, reliable, and essential journalism here in Athens.
An incident occurred on Court Street in recent weeks involving a young black man who was arrested by Athens City Police Department officers in a way that some have characterized as excessive. I'm joined by senior writer Nathan Hart, who's been following the story since it broke. So what happened a few weeks ago involving this arrest?
Yeah, so that's the heart of the question. It's a very complicated series of events, but from what Chief Tom Pyle has shared, it basically goes like at around midnight or so. J Bar, an employee at J Bar, told like a random person in the bar to call the Athens Police Department because there was a guy that like kept trying to get in and was like causing problems for employees, right? Mm-hmm. And so then the police show up, and they were like down the street because they were doing bar checks because I don't remember there was some weekend going on, so they were like going into bars to like catch underage drinkers or whatnot. But so they responded really fast, and the guy. Ty Beeler, apparently like the police approached them after like a bar employee like pointed out Ty Beeler and was like, yeah, that's the guy that's like messing with us. And so the police came up to him. From what I learned last night, what I heard happened was that like some sort of physical altercation broke out. Like that's Pyle can't go into details about what exactly happened because that could possibly taint a jury pool. Mm-hmm. So he's being very tight-lipped about it.
Yeah.
But he said some sort of physical thing happened, like Beeler was resisting arrest or something, and those two police officers like took him to the ground and like they were holding him down, and then that third police officer that was like in the video, like that third police officer just like came up after because they like saw two other cops like wrestling with someone, and they're like, oh, I guess I'll help. So that happened, and the video was when all three of them were like holding him on the ground, and there were a bunch of like people on the sidewalk yelling at him. And then the social media thing erupted, and a lot of people were very critical of the APD, saying that they used excessive force on him, like the three people weren't needed to restrain this like one average-sized guy. So yeah.
So a couple days later, then on that following Monday, this happened on a Sunday night.
Yeah. Sunday morning / Saturday night. It was like 1 a.m.
Okay. And so then on that following Monday, the city held a press conference, an emergency press conference to address this. So what happened at that?
Well, basically, Mayor Steve Patterson was there. He didn't say much. Tom Pyle was there. He did most of the speaking. And then I think it was the safety director for City of Athens. He was there, but he did not say a single word.
Okay.
But Tom Pyle basically like he wanted to clarify like what happened because there was no like official statement, no like police report until that press conference.
Right.
So people were just speculating on Twitter like, oh, like those cops maybe they're OUPD, maybe they're APD, maybe there's like a mix of them. So he like clarified what happened. That was when he gave the description of like how they identified him, because there's also a lot of speculation that they had that the cops were like holding down the wrong guy. That like some other they like held out some other guy, and the actual guy that was fighting everyone was they didn't get. And he clarified that Pyle said he was confident that they got the right guy because for one, the bar staff pointed out to him like this is the guy, and they had like a good clothing and height description before that. And he said like some of the confusion came from that before Ty Beeler was like wearing a sports jersey supposedly, and then he put on like a flannel over it, and so like some people were like confused because like the sports jersey was very recognizable, and then in the video there's a guy wearing a flannel. So yeah, he said he was pretty confident that that they had gotten the right guy. And he also made some comments about race. Not like, he basically just said that he didn't think race was a factor here. Like he didn't think that his officers singled Beeler out for being a black man in a crowd. And what's interesting is that he actually like clarified some of those statements, because apparently that like they thought him saying that was like glossing over the issue. So he clarified some of that last night at the Ask the Chiefs event. He said that like he didn't mean to just like gloss over it, be like, no, race wasn't involved. He like got more into the nuance that like he didn't believe he had any officers on the force that would have singled someone out for the race, and that that he didn't think there were any officers on the force that would have singled someone out for the race, and that he was pretty confident that race wasn't involved. But he did go on to say that like race is like always a factor when police and people of color interact. He basically just said that like the police have their own like perceptions, and then the people of color have their own like perceptions from like what they've experienced and what they've seen. So like those things get involved sometimes.
So several activist groups criticized the Athens Police Department for what they consider to be excessive force. Can you go into detail about who some of those groups are and what they were saying?
Well, it seemed like to me there's a Black Lives Matter group. It was that much just because they had signs everywhere. And then I think there is another group. The Black Lives Matter group basically said like this was excessive, like you didn't need 3 people.
And this was at the Ask the Chiefs event.
Yes, the Ask the Chiefs event,
which occurred on Tuesday night.
Yes.
And it was moved. It was supposed to occur.
Yeah, it was supposed to occur a week ago
at Donkey Coffee, but the Athens Revolutionary Socialists planned a protest. So the Athens Police Department moved it to a week later. Yeah,
and so they moved it a week later. There weren't actually any protests like outside or anything. There weren't any like protests inside really. There was
let's back up a little bit. What was this event, and why were they holding the Ask the Chiefs?
Well, they were holding this Ask the Chiefs event just to like start a conversation with like the community and the police about what happened and like how they can do better. And I mean the coffee with the cop thing was like originally planned, so I think this was just like the substitute for that with like a more like intentional focus instead of just like getting coffee.
Yeah, it was more so to field questions from the community members about this specific event.
Yeah, this specific thing, and less like, you know, like what's it like being a cop or whatever.
Yeah. So were there any protesters at this event?
Not that I would like. I mean, I'm sure there were people that like consider themselves to be protesting, but not in the conventional way of like disrupting or yelling or something. There were just like there were a few people like there's these 2 people that were quietly holding a Black Lives Matter sign in the corner.
So there were demonstrators.
Demonstrators, yeah, that's a better word for it. Like I don't think proceedings ever got interrupted. But yeah, there were a few groups of activists there. There was Black Lives Matter, because they had signs everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then I believe the Athens Revolutionary Socialists were there, but they like didn't have anything to identify themselves with.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just intuition.
Sure. So one of the officers who helped arrest Beeler has a history of excessive force incidents. Can you explain that in more detail?
Yeah. So last night, Pyle clarified that like a lawsuit, which is what the officer Ethan Dorr, the one who has the history of excessive force,
Mm-hmm.
he's being sued by someone for excessive force
In a separate incident?
Yeah, in a separate incident than this.
Okay.
I believe Pyle said it was from when Dorr worked for Logan Police Department.
Mm-hmm.
And he said a lawsuit is different than like a police policy violation, because like a lawsuit, like it doesn't necessarily mean that they violated some sort of policy. It just means that someone thinks they were like harmed during the process. So yeah, basically like a lawsuit is like a legal thing, and the police policy is like an internal thing.
Mm.
So basically, like Dorr being sued doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to get reprimanded by the police department. Pyle even went so far as to say that like he pointed at Andrew Powers, who was there, and then
Who's Andrew Powers?
he's the chief of High University Police Department.
Okay.
And then he pointed to Chief Tiffany Timms, who's the chief of Hawking College Police, and he said, "Well, I mean, we've all been sued before, so like it's kind of like a normal thing, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
or like a common thing." And he said basically that since Dorr they reviewed it, and since he hadn't violated any policies, like there's nothing actionable to go on.
Police department policies?
Yeah, police department policies. They couldn't like reprimand him or require training or anything,
Mm-hmm.
because he like technically like they didn't think he violated any policies. And also the Logan incident, that was before he worked for Athens. They knew about the Logan incident like in the lawsuit when they were
Mhm.
hiring him, and Pyle said that they hired him despite this.
Did he explain why?
No, he didn't explain why. He just like said we just hired him despite it. I'm guessing because he understood the nuance between lawsuit and like policy violation.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to this, Nathan?
Yeah, Pyle also talked about last night at the Ask the Chiefs thing about like the use of force and like how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Some like big takeaways that I thought were interesting was 269 use of force incidents since 2007
In Athens?
in Athens,
Mm.
which is like when Pyle started working there.
Okay.
And so he basically said the use of force is like anything beyond like put your hands behind your back and they put the handcuffs on.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not considered a use of force, but like anything beyond that is a use of force. And he said like 48% of use of force incidents involve 3 or more officers. When someone in the crowd asked if like this like 3 or more thing happens a lot, or like if they had only gotten 3 officers because he was a black man, yeah, and he said 48% of them happened with 3 or more officers. And he also said people were concerned about, you know, how it looked in the video of like them holding his head down into the
Yeah.
concrete.
Yeah.
He said that's like common police practice. He said like that's policing 101, because if you hold their head down, it's much harder for a person to get up.
Mm.
And he doesn't want, like when they're trying to arrest someone, he said he doesn't want someone to be mobile and moving around because they could like stumble or like wrestle through like and then like fall through a window or like fall into the street or something. So they like almost always, if someone's resisting, they try to like wrestle them to the ground and then slap the cuffs on them and like hold their head down because it's harder to get up when your head's down like that.
Yeah. Were there any big moments at this event that stuck out to you?
Well, there are a few like there was one moment that I felt like one of the first moments where like the crowd like got into it
Mm-hmm.
was when this one gentleman, I didn't catch his name because he left before it was over, but he shared that he knew Ty Beeler, and he basically said that like Ty Beeler was he grew up with like 2 respectful parents, and he played soccer and he didn't curse or anything, and he also like stressed that like this incident, while like Beeler wasn't like majorly injured, and like I'm pretty sure he said, Pyle said at the press conference that Beeler had like a scrape on his arm or something. He said while he wasn't physically injured, that like this sort of thing can like mentally impact Beeler for like the rest of his life.
Mm.
And that like seemed to like really strike a chord with the crowd, and like they all snapped for him afterwards.
Yeah, we should also specify that Ty Beehler is not an Ohio University student.
Yes, he goes to the University of Cincinnati, and I know that he is studying mechanical engineering.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Nathan. We
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming on.
Hey all, Sarah Horn here. I'm the digital manager at the New Political. And if I had to pick the best decision I made as a college freshman, joining this outstanding publication would be it. At TMP, I've had the experience of creating both compelling written and digital content. My understanding of local politics has also immensely improved. TMP makes integration between written and digital work for staffers a priority and offers a unique opportunity to have a wide portfolio of clips. Not only that, but working for this publication helped me land an internship in Washington, D.C. as a digital productions intern for The Hill. Our publication is award-winning, independent, nonpartisan, and run by a dedicated team of student journalists. Apart from its content, the New Political has brought me some of my closest friends. The people who I work with make my job fun and fulfilling, and they never cease to amaze me with their kindness, collaborative spirits, and humor. If you too want to join the New Political, come to our all-staff meetings Sunday evening at 7 p.m. in Scripps Hall 210, or reach out to me at shorne, shorne, @thenewpolitical.com.
A forum was held last week featuring 6 candidates running for Athens City Council, where they discussed housing reform and city policing. I'm joined by managing editor Cole Behrens and staff writer Eric Boll, who both covered the event for TMP. How are you both?
I'm doing fantastic today.
I'm doing dandy.
Dandy?
Same as usual.
So who are the candidates that appeared at this forum, and why are they significant?
So we had Ellie Hamrick, who is running on a socialist platform. We had Chris Monday, who is running on a campaign of housing reform and kind of just fixing the housing rent problems, et cetera. We have the incumbents being Democrat Sarah Grace, Democrat Peter Kotsis, and Independent Pat McGee. And then we had Beth Clodfelter, who is running kind of a similar campaign to the 3 incumbents.
Okay, and so why are these candidates significant?
So Ellie Hamrick is a very proud and out socialist candidate, which is very much so kind of contrasting with all the other kind of candidates who are, I mean, Chris Monday's also kind of shaking the boat a little, but the other 4 candidates are kind of standard party line candidates. They are talking about issues that affect the city and not making any statements such as like redistributing the wealth or statements like that. So one thing that all the candidates talked about a fair bit was housing, as that's been kind of the central topic for this entire election. Chris Monday, my apologies, discussed an idea to put a tax on landlords after they have a certain amount of properties. So you also saw the police violence and use of force was a big topic discussed by the candidates. Ellie Hamrick immediately felt that the force used was racially motivated.
Against Ty Beehler?
Yes.
Several of the candidates, kind of expressed, the desire to see more. Pat McGee, I know, expressed the desire to see more context, wait for more information to develop.
About the Ty Beehler incident?
Regarding the alleged excessive force incident. And they, called for, community outreach and discussion. But Ellie Hamrick called for, a massive overhaul of the policing system in Athens. And Chris Monday, he advocated for, he said he expressed his concern for Ty Beehler's mental health following the incident.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Hamrick go as far as to say that she wants to disarm the entire APD?
Yeah, she once said that she would like to disarm the APD, and I'm not sure if that's in the purview of the responsibilities of the city council. I'm not sure how that would be enacted or enforced, but that's her policy position.
Gotcha. So what did the format of this forum look like?
So the format was that at the first, at the beginning of the forum, they took 2 questions from the press, and the press who showed up were the Post, the Athens News, the Athens Messenger, and us, the New Political.
You and Cole.
Yeah. So they took 2 questions at the beginning from the Post, and I believe it was the Messenger. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, the Messenger went with you. They had the Post and the News went first. Connor Morris and George Shokak.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they took 2 questions from them, and then they referred the rest of the questions to the crowd for a while. Mm-hmm. And then they brought it back to 2 questions from the press, and then they took questions from the crowd, and then they wrapped it up with closing statements.
I must say that they moved to a larger venue for the second event. The first event was held at the public library.
The mayoral event.
The mayoral event, and that led to overflow seating. Mm-hmm. And I think they may have anticipated a larger audience for the city council forum, so they had the Athens Rec Center out on East State Street was the location for it, and I wouldn't even fit in less than 50 people probably in attendance.
So were these questions that were asked by the attendees who came, were they pre-written questions, or were people just raising their hands?
The same format as last time, with the users submitted questions on the paper that are vetted.
What kind of questions were asked among the audience members?
So we had a lot of people asking about how they could potentially see a reduction in crime in the city. And one answer that all the candidates kind of suggested or all agreed upon was, with the exception of Pat McGee, he disagreed with this, that lighting in the city needs to be improved, that we need to see more lighting, better use of lighting. A lot of people felt that like the dark streets really don't lend towards feeling safe in the city. Mm-hmm. Pat McGee issued kind of a sort of a rebuttal against this, saying that what about people who want to go outside at night and look at the stars? He talked about how there are people from Columbus who come to Athens and are surprised when they can look up in the night sky and actually see the stars.
Because there's very little light pollution.
Yeah. Another question that we saw asked at this forum was, like, if you get elected, what policy or what programs would you like to attempt to put in place? And I think Beth Clodfelter, she wanted the city government to, in all the gardens that are ran by the city, you know, all the flower boxes and stuff, that only Ohio native species be planted in those boxes. And tying that in with kind of just the recent discussion around the global climate crisis and our environment, I thought that was kind of a very politically relevant answer.
Okay.
And I found Beth Clodfelter's whole general policy discussion and, you know, kind of viewpoint and political philosophy approach, I found it to be very similar to Mayor Steve Patterson's in a lot of ways.
How so?
You know, in policy that reflects like improving infrastructure and improving like public works projects, such as the policy that Eric just discussed.
So were there any big moments from that stuck out to you during the event? Any particular exchanges between candidates, or maybe an exchange between a candidate and an audience member?
So at one point, Chris Monday, he gave kind of a little bit of an abrasive take on that we could get through this housing crisis if we all just sat down like adults and talked it out.
Kind of a condescending.
Yeah, he got a little bit heated when he was saying it. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I don't think any candidates kind of went too rogue.
It was overall a pretty tame event.
Yeah.
Just, you know, questions being read. And I mean, there were 6 of them, so they didn't really have a whole lot of time to work up into getting comprehensive answers to questions.
Yeah. How long did each candidate speak for, would you say? You know, just an estimate.
They felt like they maybe got a minute a pop per question. Just went down in the order.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
An audience member would ask one question and every single candidate on stage would answer?
Well, the audience member, the proctor or the MC would read the questions submitted. But yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you guys want to add to this?
No. I think it's good to see that there's 3 spots open and there are 6 candidates, and many of the candidates have different viewpoints. A lot of them have different policy positions. There are 3 incumbents. Mm-hmm. I think it'll be interesting to see how the incumbent challenger dynamic plays out, especially with Democrat Beth Clodfelter challenging the other 3 at-large seats, 2 of which are occupied currently by Democrats, 1 occupied by Pat McGee. It'll be interesting to see if she can sort of break away in this field of pretty similarly positioned politicians.
Yeah.
Especially Sarah Grace. Sarah Grace has had 2 major pieces of progressive legislation. Sarah Grace had a recent bill that the one that Damon Crane had claimed was stealing his platform was that it was
to increase the penalties
Yes.
for landlords who repeatedly commit housing violations.
Yes, and she had the affordable housing plan that was City Council just voted to approve the recommendations for consideration. She had that last week, and Pete Kotsis sits on the transportation committee and has been involved with a lot of the transportation stuff in Bailey's and
Trail.
Yeah, the Bailey's
Trail
Trail system. Yeah. So these incumbent candidates do have some pork barrel legislation behind their backs in terms of production. So,
anything else from you, Eric?
I'm just going to touch on some just general stuff. Peter Kotsis, he kind of started off the night by advertising himself as the small business candidate. He talked about his bike shop and how he kind of understands the local economy.
He owns Athens Bicycle, correct?
Yes, Athens Cycle.
Athens Cycle?
Cycle Bicycle. It's the one on Stimson Avenue.
Okay.
Following up on that, Pat McGee kind of put himself in the position of this watchdog candidate who will watch the finances of the city, question why they're spending so much money on certain projects. As Cole already suggested, Beth Clodfelter kind of put herself out there as a bit of the environmental candidate.
Plus infrastructure.
Yeah. Sarah Grace also touched on infrastructure as well as one of her main points that she wants to see worked on. And Ellie Hamrick and Chris Monday were both endorsing Slumlord Smackdown and a lot of housing reform.
Slumlord Smackdown is Damon Crane, mayoral candidate Damon Crane's platform, which involves heavy penalties and increases in support of code enforcement for what Damon Crane is alleging is a city run by slumlords.
Yeah, upholding rental property conditions in the city.
Yes, upholding rental property conditions. That's the current block in Athens is Chris Monday, Ellie Hamrick, and Damon Crane running on the platform of housing.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And that wraps it up here on Athens Happens. Make sure to tune in every Friday for new episodes that shed light on the politics that impact all of our lives. Remember, you can find the show on the New Political's website, Spotify, SoundCloud, and on YouTube in a video podcast format. And we are again on iTunes because of popular demand and because iTunes is arguably the biggest platform for podcasting. We are there. You can find us there. It's great. Also, be sure to check out our website at thenewpolitical.com, where we regularly report stories on what really happens here in Athens, and follow at The New Political on social media. Thank you guys so much.